All right, welcome back. This is tutorial 5 of the Fusion 360 tutorials. The last one, we finished up our 2D sketching tutorials. We did all this. So now we're going to move on to solid modeling. Here's where we get to the real fun stuff. We're just going to cover the basics. We're going to make a little cube. We're going to make a donut. We're going to pattern some holes on a rectangle. We're going to do some pattern for circular stuff. We're going to use loft, sweep, and coil. Okay. So all of these tools, these tutorials might not be super complicated, but it's understanding all of these tools and using them together that makes CAD modeling fairly complex. Okay. So we're going to start, we're just going to start super simple. We're going to make a 5-inch cube. So let's hop over to Fusion. This is our last assignment here, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And we've got a new untitled thing. So every three-dimensional object starts out exactly the same as our two-dimensional ones. The only thing is, once we're done with our two-dimensional shape, we add in another component to it, something called an extrusion. So you'll notice that all of our 2D stuff, we always start a sketch, and then we draw something, and then we finish our sketch. The default setting for Fusion is that it's going to be always in 3D mode. So unless we start a sketch, all of our tools here at the top of the toolbar are going to be three-dimensional modeling tools. Now, we've only used two-dimensional up until this point, but now we're going to start working with three-dimensional tools. So with that being said, let's start making a cube. So just like any other project, we're going to start by making a two-dimensional sketch, and I'm going to pick any of these planes in the center of the screen to start working on. So the way I'm going to make a cube is I'm essentially just going to make a 5-inch by 5-inch square, and then I'm going to finish my sketch, and I'm going to use the extrude tool to make it into a cube. So I'm going to take my rectangle tool, starting at my origin. Again, just click once and let go. You do not need to click and drag. And remember, if we want to set our dimensions before we even draw it, if we don't feel like using the dimension tool, before you place your square, I'm just going to type in 5 for my first dimension and then hit tab to switch over to the height, and then 5 for my second dimension, and then press enter, and we automatically get a 5 by 5 square. So we've got a 5 by 5 square. Now to make it a cube, we're going to go to finish sketch, and you'll see all the tools on the top of the toolbar here have reverted back to three-dimensional modeling. This is where we actually get to use it. So I'm going to rotate the camera around, and you'll see that this is just two-dimensional. Like if I hover over it right here, or if I go to my top view, this is just a two-dimensional line. This is infinitesimally thin. So if I want to make it a solid, up here in my 3D modeling tools at the top of the toolbar now, you'll see there's an option called extrude. All right, it's the little block with the arrow going up. So I'm going to click on extrude, and it'll automatically select this face. Now, if you have a really complex geometry with like a lot of faces and a lot of sketches and stuff, it may not automatically select this face. But since there's only one face, we're going to, it's just going to default pick this one. So there are two different ways you can do this. You can click and drag this arrow until our measurement reads 5 inches, just like that. Or in our extrusion, the dialog box that pops up on the right-hand side, under distance, we can change that to 5 inches, okay? Then we just press OK. Boom, look at that. We got a cube, 5-inch by 5-inch by 5-inch cube. And that's it. That's how you convert a two-dimensional object to a three-dimensional shape, okay? So I'm going to click save, and I'm just going to call this cube. And that's saved in there. Awesome. So let's go back to our checklist. We got that one done, and let's keep it going. So we got that cube done. So now we're going to revolve a circle around any axis to create the shape of a donut. All right. So if you don't totally understand this at first, that's fine. I'm going to make a new design up here, close out my old one. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a circle, and then I'm going to make a line. And rather than mirror the geometry across the line, I'm going to revolve it. And it's going to take the profile of that circle and revolve it around that axis. So I'm going to start a new sketch. I'm going to pick any plane, and just anywhere, I'm going to use my circle tool, and I'm going to draw a circle. It does not matter what size, as it was not specified. Yeah, it just says circle around any axis. So I'm going to draw a circle, and then using my line tool, I'm just going to draw a vertical line right here. You can pretty much put this anywhere and you'll end up getting the shape of a donut. It doesn't really matter. But now we've got a circle and we've got a line. So I'm going to press finish sketch, and you'll see now we're in 3-dimensional mode. And again, these are just 2-dimensional objects. So if I want to make a donut, instead of using the extrude tool, I'm going to switch over to the revolve tool, which is right next to the extrude tool. And what it's going to do is it's going to take this circle and it's going to sweep it along this axis to make a donut shape. So I'm going to click on revolve, and it's going to auto select this profile because it's the only sealed profile there. But now it wants to know where we're revolving it around. We can do it around this line. We can also do it around any of these axes. This also works. But I'm just going to pick my line. And as soon as I click on that, you'll see we get a nice little donut shape. So this makes us a cool little donut. And you can also change how far it rotates with this little thing here. So you can do like partial revolutions and stuff like that. But for our sake, we're just going to do a full 360-degree rotation and then press OK. And now we got a nice little donut. It's very shiny. So that's it for Revolve. Revolve is a really, really useful tool if you're trying to make symmetrical objects. Like if you want to make something like a vase or a pencil or a pen or anything cylindrical, really, the Revolve tool works really well for keeping symmetry around an axis. So I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to call this Revolve and press enter. And let's hop back over to our checklist. All right, so we got our donut done. Now we're going to move into the rectangular pattern tool. This one is a little more complicated. Patterning with 3-dimensional objects, especially rectangular pattern, is a little more difficult than circular pattern, I found, because there's a lot of parts to it. So I'm just going to do my best to walk you through it step by step. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a 4x5x2 rectangular prism. All right, not a cube, a rectangular prism. So I'm going to make a new design here. I'm going to start a new sketch. And the thing about this is that 4x5x2, you can make this any way. You can make a 4-inch by 5-inch rectangle and then extrude it by 2 inches. You could make a 5-inch by 2-inch rectangle and then extrude it by 4 inches. You could make a 2x4-inch rectangle and extrude it by 5 inches. It doesn't really matter because it'll end up being the same size. But for me, I'm just going to do a 4x5 rectangle and then extrude it by 2. So using my rectangle tool, start at my origin, and rather than dimensioning, I'm just going to type in 4, then hit tab to go over and make this 5, then press enter. I've got a 4x5 rectangle. Now to make it a rectangular prism, we're going to go finish sketch, and we're going to use the extrude tool here. And you can either drag this arrow out to 2 inches, or I'm just going to type in the number 2 and then press enter. And now we have a 4x5x2 rectangular prism. Okay, so now the more difficult part, the rectangular pattern. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a half-inch by half-inch square on the top left corner of my cube, and I'm going to make it be a cutout. And then I'm going to pattern it all along that face. So here's the thing. Now that we have a solid, if we ever want to make features on that solid, what we can do is we're going to start a new sketch, but rather than picking a 3D plane like we do for all our other stuff, I'm actually going to select the top of this rectangle right here. And now you'll see if I rotate, I'm still in sketch mode right now. Try not to rotate your camera while you're in sketch mode because it kind of messes with your orientation. But you can see my sketch plane that I just made is directly on top of that rectangular prism I just made. Oops, sorry, I zoomed out way too far. I don't know why my mouse does that. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is on the face of this rectangle, I'm going to take my rectangle tool, and in the top left corner, I'm going to draw a 0.5 by 0.5 square. Okay. And you'll notice that's just two-dimensional. And I'm still in sketch mode right now because I have this grid. So I'm going to press finish sketch, and you'll see there is a blue line that says that this is a sketch directly on top of my three-dimensional model. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my extrude button, and I'm going to take this. And while extrusions can be used to make solid objects like this, you can make a little solid. If you ever want to cut something out, you can go the other way, and you'll see how that turned red instead of blue. So now it's actually cutting. So it doesn't matter how far you go in on this, just for demonstration purposes. If this value is negative, that means you're cutting. Same thing if this is red. So I'm just going to press enter, and you'll see now I have a little cutout on this square right here. Okay. So now what we're going to do is um, we're going to create a pattern, and we're going to pick a rectangular pattern. And you'll see right now it wants to select this whole cube, but that's because under object type right now it says bodies. So in this dialog box, we're going to change bodies to features, and then it'll let me select this little cutout that we just created. So now we need to select the axes that we are going to pattern this along. So under select, we're going to select our axes. You can pick what lines you want to use to pattern this along. So you can really pick any of these lines so long as they're in the correct direction, but I want it to go horizontally and vertically. So I'm going to find an edge of this that goes one that goes horizontally and one that goes vertically. So you can see these little arrows popped up. Now, if I want to pattern them, you can either click and drag these arrows. The horizontal arrow will make them go across, and the down arrow will make them go vertically. Oh my God, I don't know why I keep zooming out like that. But if you ever want to change the quantity, if you click it on an arrow and move them around, or just like click on it in general, this little box right here in the center, this might be hovering around in different places. You might have to hunt for it. But I can change my quantity right here. I can also change it in the dialog box under axis 1 or axis 2. But if I want it to be patterned 5 times instead of 3, I just change my quantity to 5. Boom, there I got 5 going across. Now, if I want to change my quantity vertically to 5, I can also get 5 there. And then I can change my spacing using the arrows or the distance value in the dialog box. And then I press OK. And boom, rather than drawing, what is this, 5 by 5, 25 different squares and extruding them individually, all with different dimensions and constraints, I can just use the pattern tool to create my pattern and leave it at that. So that is the rectangular pattern tool. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to call this rectangular 3D. Because we did one rectangular pattern over here. We already called it rectangular pattern, but that was 2D. So I'm going to call this one rectangular 3D. Okay. All right, that's about as difficult as it gets in terms of most of these tools that we're going to use. So let's jump back on over to our checklist and see what's next. We got done with our rectangular pattern. So let's start with circular pattern. We're going to create a 10-inch diameter circle and extrude it by 1 inch. So we're going to get like a disc. And then we're going to make a 1-inch diameter circle and pattern that around the larger face of the circle. So what we're going to do is I'm going to make a new design. I'm going to close out my old ones. And we're going to start a new sketch on any plane. Use my circle tool here. I'm going to make a circle that's 10 inches in diameter. So again, if I don't click yet, I can just type in the number 10 and then press enter. And that gives me a 10-inch diameter circle. That saves me from having to use the dimension tool. So if I want to make a little disc, I'm going to finish my sketch and I'm going to extrude this circle out by 1 inch. So now I got this little hockey puck. Okay. So I'm going to make a 1-inch diameter circle and pattern that around the larger face of the circle. So I'm going to start a new sketch, but rather than doing it on one of the planes, I'm just going to select the face of this little hockey puck. I'm going to take my circle tool and I'm going to draw a circle kind of near the edge here. And I'm going to make it 1 inch in diameter. And if I ever want to move this, you can just click and drag on this center point here, and it should move to wherever you need it to go. I'm going to finish my sketch, and then I'm going to extrude that circle to be just a little like button face, kind of like that. 0.3 inches is fine. So now I've got a hockey puck and I've got a little nub thing hanging right on the end. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to pattern it around the larger face of the circle. So under create, I'm going to go to pattern and then circular pattern. Under object type, again, we want to make sure that bodies is changed to features, and we're going to select that little button that we just made. And then the axis, because of where I positioned this larger circle, I could technically select this green one here, and that would still work. But if you didn't do that, you could also just select the outside of your big hockey puck, and that also works. You can also use this arrow here to increase and decrease the number of patterns you want to make. Okay, so we'll pattern it 12 times just for fun, and now we've got a kind of looks like a sewer hatch or like a Lego brick or something. All right, so that is how to use the pattern tool, and I think we will call it at that, and we'll continue on with the other stuff later. All right, so see you in the next video.